Funeral directors handle the dead, but their real nightmare is dealing with the living. From demanding refunds over spotty Wi-Fi during a eulogy to trying to return a custom urn because it clashes with the new drapes, the audacity is unbelievable. We have collected 55 of the most insane complaints ever filed against funeral homes. Trust me, after this video, you'll realize it's not the dead you need to fear. It's the unhinged living. 1. A Texas woman tried to return a custom urn 3 weeks later because it clashed with her new curtains. She walked in, placed the urn full of ashes on the counter, and asked to swap it for a beige one to match her throw pillows. When the director explained that used urns are not returnable merchandise, like jeans at Walmart, she threatened to sue for emotional distress caused by bad interior design. 2. You would think a visitation is about paying respects, but for one guy in Florida, it was about fantasy football. He filed a formal complaint because the Wi-Fi in the chapel was spotty. He claimed that because he could not update his roster during the eulogy, he lost his weekly matchup and demanded the funeral home reimburse his $50 buy-in fee. I wish I was making this up, but some people really cannot disconnect for 20 minutes. 3. Imagine realizing you forgot the clothes for the deceased. That happened to a Chicago family, so the director kindly dressed the gentleman in a spare clean suit so he wouldn't be bare. Instead of a thank you, the family went ballistic because the suit was navy blue and the deceased would not be caught dead in anything other than black. Seriously, would you scream at someone who just saved you from embarrassing your family or just let it go? 4. A family was furious that the funeral home didn't provide attractive pallbearers. They didn't have enough male relatives to carry the casket, so the staff respectfully stepped in to help. Later, the niece filed a complaint stating that the staff members were too old and balding, which she claimed ruined the aesthetic of the procession photos. She actually suggested that the funeral home should keep a roster of male models on call to ensure the service looked like a high-end magazine spread. 5. Sometimes the complaints aren't about the dead, but the drive. A procession was moving at a respectful pace when the lead car got a call from the deceased's nephew. He was driving 3 cars back and was furious the hearse was moving too slow because he had a dinner reservation. He demanded the driver step on it and weave through traffic like an action movie just so he could make it to appetizers on time. 6. We have heard of bridezillas, but griefzillas are real too. A UK family refused to pay the bill because the funeral director did not look sad enough. They argued his professional composure was cold and demanded he should have shed actual tears to prove he cared about an uncle he never met. Do you think funeral staff should have to act like paid mourners? Or is professional silence the better route? 7. One family treated a wake like a hotel brunch and got mad when it didn't match up. They left a furious comment card stating the ham sandwiches were too dry and the coffee wasn't a premium roast. They actually expected a culinary experience while mourning and were genuinely offended the funeral home focused more on the body than the moisture content of the cold cuts. It is a funeral home, not a Michelin star restaurant. 8. Most people appreciate a comfortable seat, but one family found the chairs in the viewing room to be a liability. They complained that the seating was too cozy and too relaxing, which caused the elderly aunt to fall asleep and snore loudly during the prayer service. They blamed the funeral home for creating an environment that induced naps and demanded folding metal chairs next time to keep everyone alert and awake through the discomfort. 9. Pricing complaints are common, but this one is wild. A man called a month after his wife's cremation to complain it was too expensive considering her size. He argued that since she only weighed 90 pounds, he should get a prorated discount based on body weight compared to a full-sized person. He genuinely tried to negotiate a price per pound rate for cremation services as if he was buying a turkey at the deli counter. 10. We know funeral processions have the right of way, but one family tried to take that privilege way too far. They filed a formal complaint because the hearse driver refused to pull into a fast food drive-thru on the way to the cemetery. The son claimed they had skipped breakfast and were starving, accusing the driver of lacking compassion for their hunger. He genuinely expected a hearse and a line of 20 cars to idle at the pickup window for hash browns while the priest waited. 11. Music choices are usually personal, but this mix-up was purely on the family. They handed the funeral director a burned CD and said, "Play track 3 for the emotional closing moment." Well, track 3 turned out to be Another One Bites the Dust by Queen. Instead of admitting they burned the wrong songs in the wrong order, they filed a complaint saying the funeral director should have spiritually sensed that the song was inappropriate and refused to play it, despite their specific instructions to push play. 12. A funeral home in Oregon got slammed with a bad review because the staff refused to let the family take the flowers from other funerals happening in the building. A woman actually wandered into the chapel next door, saw a beautiful arrangement of lilies, and tried to drag them into her father's service. When staff stopped her, she argued that the other family had too many anyway, and accused the funeral home of being stingy with the floral inventory. 13. We live in a digital age, but this request crosses every line. A teenage grandson was furious that the funeral home staff stopped him from climbing onto the casket to take a final selfie with his grandfather for TikTok. His parents didn't apologize for his behavior. Instead, they complained to management that the staff was stifling his creative grieving process and embarrassing him in front of his followers. Seriously, where do we draw the line with social media at funerals? 14. We have heard some wild demands, but this one regarding the burial is hard to top. A family was disgusted that the cemetery crew used dirty dirt to fill the grave. They filed a complaint stating that the soil from the ground was too muddy and full of rocks. They genuinely expected the funeral home to import bags of premium, sterilized potting soil from a garden center to cover the casket because the natural earth wasn't aesthetic enough for their standards. Do you think that is a reasonable request, or have we lost touch with reality? 15. Temperature control is a constant battle, but usually, people understand why funeral homes are kept cool. Not this guy. He complained that the viewing room was freezing and demanded they turn the heat up to 80 degrees. When the director explained that a lower temperature is necessary for the preservation of the body, the man waved his hand and said, "He is dead, he won't mind the heat, but I am freezing." Prioritizing your own comfort over the condition of the deceased is a bold move. 16. A family in Boston filed a serious complaint because the funeral home staff acting as pallbearers were not all the exact same height. They claimed the slight tilt of the casket ruined the symmetry of the procession photos and looked unprofessional. They actually suggested the shorter staff members should have worn platform shoes or stilts to even things out. Imagine being mad that the people respectfully carrying your loved one did not match perfectly like a set of decorative bookends. 17. 3 siblings turned the ash collection process into a chaotic science experiment. They showed up with digital kitchen scales and demanded the funeral director divide their mother's ashes into 3 piles of exact equal weight down to the gram. When one pile was slightly heavier, the youngest brother accused the director of playing favorites and giving the sister more of mom. Do you think people lose their common sense when grief hits, or were they always this petty? 18. A funeral home in New Jersey received a complaint about their lack of valet service. The parking lot was full due to a large service, and a guest had to park about 50 yards away on a side street. He was so incensed by the physical exertion of walking for 2 minutes that he demanded the funeral home pay for his dry cleaning, claiming he broke a sweat in his suit. It is a funeral, sir, not a red carpet event at a Hollywood nightclub. 19. One widow was extremely unhappy with the hearse, but not because it was dirty or late. She complained that the black Cadillac was too gothic and depressing for her husband's final ride. She genuinely asked why the funeral home did not have a fleet of lime green or bright yellow vehicles to celebrate life. When told that black is the industry standard for dignity and respect, she told them they lacked imagination and were stuck in the past. 20. A family asked to reschedule a burial on the morning of the service because it conflicted with a limited-time sale at a local furniture store. They wanted to push the interment back by 3 hours so they could snag a discount on a sectional sofa before heading to the cemetery. The director had to explain that the gravediggers and priest were on a tight schedule, and the family left muttering about how the funeral home cost them a great deal on leather recliners. 21. Weather is unpredictable, but one family decided it was actually a service failure. It started to rain lightly during the graveside service, and the funeral director had set up a large tent to keep everyone dry. The next day, the son called to demand a partial refund because the rain made the grass muddy and ruined his Italian leather shoes. He argued that the funeral home should have checked the Doppler radar more effectively or rescheduled the entire burial on the fly to ensure sunny skies for his footwear. 22. A group of relatives riding in the family limousine filed a formal grievance because the ride to the cemetery was too quiet. They were upset that the driver refused to turn on the radio to a pop station and didn't provide a complimentary bottle of champagne. They claimed the lack of a party atmosphere made the 20-minute drive boring and accused the driver of having zero personality. I am not sure what kind of vibe they were expecting, but a hearse procession usually isn't the place for a tailgate party. 23. We have all seen those touching white dove releases, but nature doesn't always follow a script. A family hired a service to release 4 doves, and naturally, the birds flew up into the sky and disappeared toward the horizon. The family was furious and complained that the birds flew away too fast. They genuinely expected the trained birds to hover in midair at eye level for 5 minutes, so everyone could get the perfect Instagram photo before flying off. How exactly do you tell a bird to pause for a selfie? 24. In the age of Zoom funerals, technical complaints are rising, but this one is purely about vanity. A woman watching the live stream from another state called the funeral home in the middle of the service to complain about the lighting. She screamed that the camera angle was unflattering and was making her crying sister look washed out on screen. She demanded they adjust the studio lights and apply a digital beauty filter to the live feed so the guests would look more photogenic while grieving. 25. A funeral director found himself in the middle of a love triangle he knew nothing about. The widow filed a complaint because the staff did not physically remove a woman from the back of the room who turned out to be the deceased's mistress. The widow argued that it was the funeral home's job to know the family's secrets and act as security bouncers to keep undesirable guests out. Do you think it is fair to expect the staff to enforce a guest list like a nightclub, or is that the family's problem? 26. People love keepsakes, but one customer treated a cremation jewelry order like a fast fashion return. She ordered a silver pendant filled with a tiny portion of ashes, but a week later, she came back demanding to swap it for the gold version because she bought a new watch. When the staff explained that the pendant was permanently sealed with industrial adhesive to keep the ashes safe, she got angry and said they were holding her father hostage in an accessory that didn't match her outfit. 27. Public speaking is hard, but usually people just write their speech on a piece of paper. One man was outraged that the funeral home podium did not come equipped with a professional teleprompter. He had emailed his eulogy to the office and assumed they would load it onto a screen for him like he was the president giving a State of the Union address. He ended up stumbling through his speech and blamed the low-tech facility for making him look unprepared in front of his cousins. 28. Artificial grass is often used at cemeteries to cover the dirt mound, but for one perfectionist, the shade of green was a deal-breaker. He complained that the astroturf used around the grave site was neon green and clashed with the natural grass, making the photos look tacky. He actually suggested the funeral home should carry 10 different shades of fake grass to color. Match the lawn, depending on the season. Imagine being that concerned about color coordination while standing in a cemetery. 29. A family provided a photo for the memorial cards that was about 20 years old and very blurry. When the cards came back looking exactly like the photo they provided, they refused to pay. They insisted that the funeral home's graphic designer should have used CSI technology to enhance the image to high definition and remove the deceased's glasses. They genuinely believed that real life works like a crime drama, where you can just click a button and magically create pixels that never existed. 30. Traffic control is standard for processions, but one family expected a presidential escort. They were angry that the police motorcycle escort only blocked intersections and didn't shut down the entire highway in both directions. The son complained that cars in the other lane were still moving and disrespecting the convoy by driving past them at the speed limit. He wanted the entire interstate frozen so they could have the road to themselves. Would you expect the world to stop turning? Or was this guy just on a power trip? 31. You would think attendance at a funeral depends on how many friends the deceased had, but one customer saw it differently. He demanded a partial refund on the chapel rental fee because the turnout was lower than he expected. He argued that the funeral home failed to market the event properly to the local community to boost the numbers. He genuinely believed it was the director's job to promote the service like a nightclub promoter, trying to fill seats on a Friday night. Do you think a funeral home is responsible for drawing a crowd, or is that on the family? 32. Accuracy is everything in printed programs, but this family set a trap for themselves. They were given a draft of the memorial folder to proofread, and 3 different family members signed off on it as perfect. On the day of the service, they realized they had misspelled their own mother's middle name. Instead of owning the mistake, they screamed at the staff for not intuitively knowing the correct spelling and demanded the funeral home reprint 500 copies instantly for free. 33. A funeral home in California has a strict no alcohol policy, which seems reasonable for a place of business. However, a group of cousins was outraged when the staff confiscated the cooler of beer they dragged into the visitation room. They filed a formal complaint stating that the funeral home was killing the vibe and preventing them from grieving in their own way. They actually argued that a 2-drink minimum would have helped everyone cope better with the loss. 34. Being on time is respectful, but one family missed the memo. The service was scheduled for 10 in the morning, and the funeral director started exactly on the dot. The deceased's brother arrived 20 minutes late and was furious that they had started without him. He filed a complaint claiming the director should have sensed he was stuck in traffic and held up the entire congregation until he could grab a coffee and find a seat. Should the world wait for you, or should you buy a watch? 35. We all appreciate high-quality amenities, but this complaint about facial tissues is next-level picky. A lady left a scathing review because the tissues provided in the family lounge were standard 2-ply, not the premium brand with aloe vera lotion. She claimed the rough tissues caused her nose to turn red, which ruined her look for the rest of the day. She seriously expected the funeral home to stock spa-quality skincare products for people blowing their noses. 36. A son created a video tribute montage on his laptop and handed the file to the funeral director 5 minutes before the service began. The file format was incompatible with the funeral home's media player, so the video wouldn't play. The son went ballistic, accusing the director of technological incompetence and ruining the legacy of his father. He refused to accept that maybe, just maybe, he should have tested his movie before the absolute last second. 37. Signage is meant to be helpful, but for one man, it was a blow to his ego. He complained that his family's name on the digital marquee outside the building was the same font size as the other service happening down the hall. He argued that since his family was more prominent in the town, their name should have been in bold, capitalized letters and at least 50% larger than anyone else's. Imagine having a popularity contest on a digital signboard while planning a funeral. 38. A funeral home collected donations for a specific charity chosen by the deceased, which is a standard request. A distant relative, however, was furious that the money wasn't going to her personal GoFundMe page for unforeseen expenses. She complained to the management that they were diverting funds away from the living survivors to give to a faceless nonprofit organization. She actually wanted the funeral director to intercept the checks and hand them to her in the parking lot. 39. We have heard of complaining about the heat, but what about the smell of Nothing? A woman complained that the funeral home smelled too sterile and too clean. She was upset that the air didn't smell like fresh-baked cookies or vanilla bean to make people feel at home. She suggested that the lack of artificial fragrance made the reality of the situation too harsh and demanded they install automatic air fresheners in every corner to mask the atmosphere of the building. 40. One driver in the procession got separated from the group because he stopped at a green light to answer a text message. By the time he looked up, the hearse and the rest of the cars were gone. He called the funeral home later to complain that the hearse driver should have noticed he was missing, stopped the entire convoy in the middle of the city, and waited for him to catch up. He refused to admit that texting while driving in a funeral procession was the real issue. 41. You might think a eulogy is supposed to be dignified, but one family filed a complaint because the minister used too many big words. They were genuinely annoyed that the officiant spoke with an elevated vocabulary, claiming it made the family feel uneducated in front of their guests. They actually demanded a partial refund of the honorarium fee because they had to think too hard to understand what he was saying about their grandfather. Apparently, they wanted a third-grade reading level for the final farewell. 42. A man tried to return a casket after the burial had taken place, which is physically impossible. His reasoning? He had a dream the night after the funeral that his mother was uncomfortable because the pillow was too firm. He called the funeral home in a panic, demanding they dig her up, swap the pillow for a memory foam version, and rebury her at their own expense. The director had to gently explain that warranties do not cover supernatural dream communications. 43. We have heard of complaining about rain, but this family was furious about the sun. During a graveside service, the sun was shining directly into the eyes of the mourners standing on one side of the grave. The son filed a complaint, stating that the funeral director should have oriented the grave differently or rotated the entire cemetery setup. He essentially blamed the staff for the rotation of the earth relative to the sun. Do you think people just look for things to be mad about? Or was he serious? 44. A family in Michigan threatened to cancel the entire service 24 hours before the event, not because of the price, but because of the carpet. They claimed the floral pattern on the lobby floor was too dizzying and made them feel nauseous when they looked down. They actually demanded the director rip up the wall-to-wall carpeting and install hardwood floors overnight just to accommodate their delicate equilibrium. When told that was impossible, they asked for a heavy discount for suffering from visual vertigo. 45. The route a hearse takes is usually the most direct and safe path, but one family had a specific superstition. They were outraged that the driver took the highway because the deceased hated the interstate in life. They claimed that driving over 55 miles per hour was disturbing his spirit and causing him unrest in the afterlife. They demanded a refund for the mileage because the driver failed to take the scenic back roads that would have added an hour to the trip. 46. Guest books are meant to be a record of who attended, but for one perfectionist daughter, it was a ruined art project. She filed a formal complaint because the funeral director allowed people with ugly handwriting to sign the premium leather register book. She was genuinely furious that an elderly uncle with shaky hands ruined the aesthetic of the page. She actually argued that the staff should have vetted everyone's penmanship at the door or hired a calligrapher to sign on their behalf. 47. A guest at a large funeral complained that his car got too hot parked in the funeral home's lot. It was a scorching July day, and there were no shade trees covering his specific parking spot. He marched into the office and blamed the management for not planting oaks 30 years ago to anticipate his arrival. He actually had the nerve to ask for a voucher for a car wash to cool his vehicle down after the service. 48. One man was absolutely outraged that the funeral home refused to live stream the cremation process itself. He argued that he had a right to witness every single second to ensure no funny business happened, demanding a GoPro camera be placed inside the retort. When the director explained that the intense heat would melt any camera instantly and it was a safety violation, The man accused them of running a secret organ harvesting operation and threatened to report them to the FBI. 49. The concept of closing time apparently doesn't apply when you are grieving. A family rented the chapel for a 2-hour visitation, but when the time was up and the staff began to clean up for the next service, the family refused to leave. They filed a complaint saying they were rushed out and kicked to the curb, even though they had stayed 45 minutes past their allotted time. Should a business let you stay all night, or are strict schedules necessary out of respect for the next family? 50. A woman called the funeral home a week after the service to complain that the thank you cards she ordered were defective. Her issue wasn't the print quality. It was that they didn't come pre-stamped and pre-addressed to her guests. She genuinely thought the funeral home staff had memorized the home addresses of all 100 people who signed the guest book and would do her secretarial work for free. She called them lazy for making her write out envelopes like everyone else in history. 51. Jealousy can strike at the weirdest times, even at a funeral. A widow filed a formal grievance against a funeral home because she felt the female funeral director was too attractive. She claimed that her late husband's brother was staring at the staff member instead of looking at the casket, which she felt was disrespectful. She actually accused the business of hiring distractions on purpose to take attention away from the deceased. Seriously, are they supposed to have a beauty limit for their employees? 52. A family was furious that the hearse used for the transport was a Cadillac and not a Mercedes-Benz. They claimed that the deceased was a Mercedes man his entire life and would be insulted to be caught dead in a domestic vehicle. They accused the funeral home of tarnishing his brand loyalty on his final journey and demanded a discount for the downgrade in automotive luxury. 53. You know the saying, "Don't speak ill of the dead"? Well, one family took that literally regarding the obituary. They wrote a 3-page essay listing every mistake the deceased had ever made, including a failed business venture in 1982. When the funeral director gently suggested that newspapers charge by the line, and this would cost thousands of dollars, the family accused him of censorship and trying to whitewash history. They eventually printed it as a pamphlet and handed it out at the door. 54. We have heard of bringing your own wine to a restaurant, but one woman tried to bring her own blooms to force a discount. She arrived with plastic buckets full of hydrangeas cut from her backyard and demanded the funeral director deduct $1,000 from the bill since she provided the decor. She genuinely expected the staff to take her garden clippings and arrange them into professional sprays for free, and was offended when they told her that labor costs money regardless of where the flowers grew. 55. And finally, the most philosophical complaint of them all. A man demanded a full refund 2 weeks after the service because he still felt sad. He argued that the purpose of a funeral is to provide closure, and since he was still grieving, the service obviously didn't work. He treated the funeral home like a mechanic who failed to fix a broken car, claiming that if the product, emotional healing, wasn't delivered instantly, he shouldn't have to pay the bill. It is honestly terrifying to think that these people walk among us, demanding refunds for rain or screaming about the wrong shade of fake grass. But I need to hear your take on this madness. Out of all 55 stories, which specific complaint was the absolute most delusional and out of touch with reality? Drop your answer in the comments right now. If this video made you laugh or just lose faith in humanity, smash that like button and subscribe for more.